Hi everyone, Master P here from the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We're here for another close reading video, and today we're taking a look at an excerpt from How I Learned to Ride the Bicycle by Frances Willard. So let's jump into it. All right, so we know that when we're reading closely, we are reading actively. We're trying to reveal those layers of meaning. We are trying to get at a better understanding of a writer's use of rhetorical strategies and better understand a writer's style in order to create those layers of meaning. So in order to actively engage in a text, we're going to need a couple of tools. We're going to need our copies of the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We're going to need our close reading passage handouts. Highlighters are always helpful. And of course, something to write with, such as a pen or a pencil. We want to start by thinking about the rhetorical situation. We want to think about how a text has been shaped by the speaker, the subject, and the audience. And in a larger, so that's our rhetorical triangle. And then on a larger level, we want to think about how the context, historical, contemporary, how all of that has shaped those elements of the rhetorical triangle to give us that rhetorical situation. So let's take a look at the situation for this piece. Frances Willard wrote this piece in 1893. It's part of a book. She wrote the book when she was 54. So in those days, that was pretty old. She had been a long time educator, advocate for women's rights. She was one of the most outspoken voices for women's rights at the time. And she was also an astute politician, and even, as we'll see, an astute rhetorician. So she had been in poor health the year before writing this text. A doctor had said, hey, the best medicine I can prescribe is to go outside and get some exercise. And she talks about in this text how she used to be outside all the time, active when she was younger. And then when she turned 16, she was forced to wear clothes and behave in a way that was considered more ladylike. And so she really celebrates and gets into this prescription of going outside and getting some exercise. So again, this piece was written well into the suffragette movement, but it's still many years before the 19th Amendment passed. Okay, so her audience for this text would be women. She really encourages women to follow in her footsteps and to engage with riding a bicycle for a multitude of reasons. This picture I love because I think this was perhaps men's fear that women, because they'd have this newfound sense of independence that Willard promotes, would say, "Sew on your own buttons, I'm going for a ride." So there are also some great cartoons that reveal men's fears about women becoming more independent that you'll find in the Language of Composition student edition. So obviously this deals with bicycle riding, the fundamentals, but on a larger level, it deals with women's independence and self-esteem and self-confidence. All right, so our first step, of course, is to read for understanding. I'm going to give you a moment to do that. This is an older text, so it may be a little bit difficult. There might be some words you don't understand or aren't familiar with, so make sure to mark those so you can look those up. So take a little bit to read for understanding, and then we will come back to looking at those larger issues. All right, so let's talk about these overall features, because as we know, and I'll highlight this box here, the process of analysis is the process of looking at how smaller pieces work together to create a larger effect, right? So we can start with the larger effect, and then we'll get down to the smaller pieces and make those connections back and forth. And I'm going to refer to my notes as well. So for purpose, I said that Willard is trying to relay an experience to encourage others to also take up bicycle riding. So I kind of combine. So two things. One, to relay an experience, a personal experience. And the other purpose she has here is to encourage other women to do the same thing. And, a larger purpose would be to, I think, inspire women to be more independent in their own daily lives, even if it's just a small thing like learning how to ride a bicycle, right? The mood, I said, is upbeat. It's inspiring. She certainly seems ready for a challenge, and I think her tone of voice is very confident. She's a very confident tone of voice that affects the mood. So speaking of tone, her attitude toward learning to ride a bicycle is very encouraging, again, confident. At times it's didactic. She seems to be teaching us what to do. Her tone toward the traditional constraints of women would be, of course, critical. That she wants women to move beyond what they've been told they couldn't do in the past. So her position is that every woman should learn to ride a bicycle, right? And the larger implication there is that every woman should learn to be independent. So, all right. Our next step would be, of course, to get into our annotation. And we're looking at her style of writing. We're looking at how she develops her argument. Then we can take our annotations and use those in our graphic organizer, which we can then turn into rhetorical analysis. So let's switch over to our passage. All right. And again, I'm going to also look at my notes here. There's so much going on. All right. So I finally concluded that all failure was from a wobbling will rather than a wobbling wheel. Love that. That's adorable. Also, I just love Willard's voice. It's kind of reminds me of a sassy grandmother. So there's this parallelism, the alliteration, and, this personification of someone's will as wobbling. Okay. So anyway, you get where I'm going. I felt that indeed the will is the wheel of the mind. And then she continues this W sound. It's very playful, I think, at this point. Her mood, we could say, is playful with this alliterative effect of the W's. And so she says, the wheel of the mind went well. Well, when the wheel of the mind went well, then the rubber wheel hummed merrily. So there's a musical quality to this section. And again, I think that contributes to the playfulness of the tone. Okay, or playfulness of the mood, excuse me. But, of course, specters of the mind, specters meaning sort of ghosts in the mind, those doubts, right? So personifying the idea of a doubt. In the aggregate of perception, now this may be some of those words that I said we aren't familiar with. We're not used to seeing them commonly, although aggregate we do. My point is, if you're unfamiliar with that word, look it up. If you know the word, that's fantastic. So she says, which we have reflected, from which we have deduced our generalizations within above. There are so many ghastly, this is what I want to get to, the ghastly and fantastical images that they must obtrude themselves at certain intervals. So these all go up to the specters of the mind. Those are the doubts, right? It's like you're going along and you're humming and you're feeling good about things, and then your doubts start to creep in. It reminds me of Virginia Woolf when she talks about the angel in the house, which is in a different text in this edition. So the sense of self-doubt that creeps in. And she uses some figurative language, a simile like filmy bits of glass in the turn of the kaleidoscope, right? Something that obscures your vision and makes you unable to see clearly, right? Okay. Let's see. Then she goes to, and who shall say by what original energy the mind forced itself at once? So here is where we have this epiphany, right? There's an original energy. It's from your unique self. The mind forced itself, that the mind has power, right? At once from the contemplation of disaster and thrust into the very movement of the foot on the pedal a concept of vigor, safety, and success. So she's asking this rhetorical question, and she's saying, who knows how the mind works, where you have this moment where you turn away from thinking about disaster to actually taking action. And I think that's really representative. This imagery, yes, she's talking about riding a bicycle, but it's so much more than that. And you could use this moment to support the idea that she's really making the point in her argument that if you cast aside doubt, if you force your mind to thrust itself into the very mood, to take action and move, that you'll find you have safety and success and energy, right? She says, I began to feel that myself plus the bicycle equaled myself plus the world. We're going to come back to this. I'm going to look at this quotation in our graphic organizer, so I don't want to say too much about it now. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. That which made me succeed with the bicycle was precisely which had gained me a measure of success in life. So really this analogy that she sets up, the bicycle, again, is so much more. It's a symbol. The bicycle is a symbol, and riding the bicycle is a symbol for women. It's an empowering action. All right, let me find where we are here. Okay. For this close reading, we skip, this is an earlier section of the passage, and then we skip down to towards the end of this excerpt. So she uses some religious words, right? She says, if I'm asked to explain why I learned the bicycle, so she's actually anticipating, it's really hard to write vertically. All right. So she's anticipating that people would wonder why she's even doing this, anticipating the argument against her behavior, perhaps. I should say I did it as an act of grace, if not of actual religion, which is interesting. So we also see here the development of her authority on this particular issue. She experienced it. She decided to do this. The cardinal doctrine laid down by my physician, and this is a bit of humor, right? Of course, her doctor, and also, so there's the play on words too, doctrine. Her physician, her doctor it makes it sound like it was an order from God, right? That she needed to, that was the cardinal doctrine. She needed to go outside. Live out of doors and take congenial exercise. Now, here's where she goes back to her personal experience. She tells about how when she was 16 years old, she was enwrapped. And that word enwrapped sounds like she was mummified. This gets at our tone, the critical tone of being forced into these kinds of clothes. It made her feel like a mummy, like she was suffocated. So she's enwrapped in these long skirts that impeded every footstep. It keeps her from being able to do what she needs to do. I have detested walking, right? And she felt a noble disdain that the conventions of life, I love this word noble here. Not just that she felt disdain, but she was above. Her implication here is that women are above these kinds of rules, just as nobility would be above these kinds of rules. And that she had been cut off from the freedom of my prairie home. Then she goes through this list. She says, okay, so actually let's go back. So walking is one. And this gets it. So here we have, there's some logos here, right? The question is, why did she learn how to? She's anticipating this question. Why does she need to learn how to ride a bicycle? Well, she's saying, I don't like walking anymore because I have to wear all these clothes. Driving is not real exercise. Here's another reason, right? And then horseback riding is the third thing. Well, that's just expensive, right? So there are very logical reasons for all of these other modes of transportation not to work. The conclusion is, here's our conclusion, our logical conclusion. The bicycle meets all the conditions, right? It does everything I need it to do. Therefore, in obedience to the laws of health, right? So she kind of goes back to the fact that she was ordered to do this, and for all these other reasons, I learned to ride. Now, the next sentence, she gets at her other motives. I also wanted to help women to a wider world, right? And here's a claim that she makes. She makes this claim. I hold that the more interests women and men can have in common in thought, word, and deed, the happier will it be for the home. And the home here representing the marriage, right? The relationship, so much more than the actual building, but really the whole environment. Okay. Besides, there's a special value to women in the conquest of a bicycle. So this goes to her portrayal, or her portrayal of herself as an adventurer, right? Someone who is tackling this journey and can succeed as a conquistador of the bicycle. And then she goes into 3 minor reasons. So here she's already listed logically her other reasons. So we've got her 3 minor reasons, and we've got natural love of adventure, some figurative language here to describe how that love was hampered, right? Which is quite beautiful. A love of acquiring a new implement of power. And this is my favorite moment. So sassy. Last but not least, because a good many people thought I could not do it at my age. I love that. That's fantastic. She says, then she goes into the outfit itself. Okay. And let's go down to this part here. Okay. So now she goes into the numbers. This is a very, very scientific part here. So she's been logical, a little humorous, and now we get to the scientific moment where she calculates how long this has taken her. She talks about the red letter day, that January 20th. She actually figures this out, and she says, she makes an allusion here. This is her ethos. She is a knowledgeable, well-read person. So she makes this reference to Benjamin Ward Richardson and the footnotes down there. From that hour, the spell was broken, right? The spell of doubt, self-doubt, the spell, perhaps, of course, the mystery of of not knowing how to ride a bicycle, but now she's figured it out. But again, I think more symbolically, that spell of self-doubt. She's done something. She's achieved something. She is no longer under the spell of, you can't do this. That spell is broken. Gladys was no more a mystery. That's the name of her bicycle, Gladys, right? Now we have this great metaphor where she compares Gladys, and she does this in other moments of the text too. She compares Gladys to a horse, as though she is breaking a horse in. And this wonderful sentence where I like to call it form follows function, right? Here are all of these things. Nobody thought I could do it. Nobody thought I could do it. I did it. Here's what's wonderful about it. Here's what's beautiful about it. And it concludes with, I had made myself master, right? She is in control. She is in charge of the most remarkable, ingenious, and inspiring motor ever yet devised upon this planet. So there's a building here that happens. And this is part of that inspirational tone. It builds at the end with this sentence, with all these details and the imagery, and then her assertion that I've made myself master. And then you get to that moment and it's like, boom. And then she says, moral, go thou and do likewise. I've inspired you. Now, here's what I'm telling you to do. right? Here's my order. Here's my directive. Go do this too. So very, very confident writer, really beautiful piece of writing. So let's go back to our graphic organizer and that we're going to use. So I said we're going to take a look at the quotation. I began to feel that myself plus the bicycle equaled myself plus the world, upon whose spinning wheel we must all learn to ride or fall into the sluice ways of oblivion and despair. Another vocabulary word there that you might need to look up means a narrow channel. So my paraphrased version, I said riding a bike felt like I could conquer the world, and we all need to learn how to manage the world. That should be the word, or. So I'll fix that. Or we'll end up on a path of disappointment and nothingness. Okay, so I said there's an analogy here. There's metaphor. There's diction. Those are the strategies I noticed. And in terms of style, I think, again, her confident tone, we could certainly talk about that as well. The effect or the function, she's logically equating riding a bike to the larger idea of freedom and self-determination. The word choice heightens the importance of being independent. Now I need to put all this together. So here's what I wrote. I said, Willard uses the experience of learning to ride a bike as a vehicle, pun intended, for making the larger point that a woman should learn to be confident in her independence. So that's my interpretation, right? That's what I think she's trying to do here. The purpose. Her logic is established through mathematical diction. The one experience equaled the other. Next, Willard employs a metaphor describing the world as a spinning wheel upon which we must all learn to ride. The metaphor brings together the motifs of movement, freedom, eternity, and equality found elsewhere in the essay. Because I want to get it, okay, so it's a metaphor, yay, woo, who cares? This is my explanation of why that use of figurative language is important. Willard presents the alternative to gaining independence with the dramatic and emphatic image of the sluiceways of despair and oblivion. So now I could turn all of this into a well-written essay in which I analyze the rhetorical strategies Willard uses to argue that every woman should learn to ride a bicycle. All right. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your hard work. Keep up the hard work. And all of us with the Language of Composition 3rd edition say, fare thee well, young scholars.